Show you how to use the Maine Balsam program to print spine labels. The first thing you're going to do is gather all your items that need spine labels and zap them all in the search for items by barcode screen. So I've already done that here, and I've selected them all by checking here, and then I'm going to go to Actions, Show, Print Labels. It's going to take me to the label printing screen. There are some things I need to do to set this up so that it's correct the first time that I come here, and then I'm going to save those as a template, and then I can use that template every time. So you only have to do this once or a few times until you get the hang of it, and then it should default to this template every single time. So the first thing that it does is take you to show you all the different call numbers and the way that they're going to be laid out on your labels. So you can type in this area on the left, and how it shows up is in the area on the right. So you can do a couple of things here. If you like your spine labels a different way, like say you like all the entire call number on one line. We use this sometimes at our primary school. The books are very skinny, and a label like this would not be able to be read. And so what we do is put everything on one line, and it prints out nice and thin, and then we put it on sideways. So if you need to do that, or if you look at this right now and notice any errors, instead of having to go back and change everything in the cataloging, you can just change it on this screen and then deal with the cataloging later. So if you find any errors or anything you want to change, you can look in the preview and figure out which ones you want to change, and then you'll go over here to the left to the formatted call numbers. Anything you type in this box is going to show up on the right. So for instance, this graphic novel here, I can see that the spine label was entered in lowercase, and I would like it to be uppercase. So I just make those changes here, and it shows up over here correctly. And let's say that I wanted this one here to be all on one line because I know that it's a skinny book and it's not going to show. I could just change that here also, and it's showing correctly over here. So now if everything is how you like it, and you always can come back to the screen later if you notice something after the fact, then you're going to go to Settings and make your template because this is your first time doing labels. I have my template all established, so all I'm going to do is apply my template and then print. And here are my labels laid out how I want them. But since this is your first time doing it, I'm going to show you how to set everything up. The first thing you want to do is grab some of your label stock and a ruler so that you're able to match everything up on this left-hand side of all these different options. So the first thing it's asking you is, are your labels continuous, meaning it feeds through a whole long string like a receipt, or is it a sheet of labels like a piece of paper? So the ones that we use are a sheet of labels like a piece of paper, so I'm going to check that box. The next one, starting position on label grid. So I'll show you an example. Here are the spine labels that we use. They're 5 across, 10 down. And if I were, say, I had already used some of this label sheet. So let's say I had used these first 2 rows and this first one on the next row, and where the cursor is blinking is where I want my next label to print. So that is row 1, 2, 3, column 1, 2. So 2 columns, 3 rows gets you to this label here. So when I'm going here to print item labels, if I want it to print where that cursor is blinking, I'm going to change this to row 3, column 2. And then you can see, I'll do it real quick so you can just see, it's moving everything on the right-hand side to start printing on the 3rd row in the 2nd column. You're doing this new on a brand new sheet, so a brand new sheet is row 1, column 1. Now, if you do pocket labels, you could adjust this differently for yours, but we do 1 spine label per book. So you could make 17 spine labels per book if you wanted to. You can set this however you want, and if you want pocket labels, that's here too. This is just how we set it up for our library. The page settings are all done according to the label stock that you have. So this is where you grab your ruler and you look at the page margins for your page and fill those in. Ours are a 1/2 inch on the left and a 1/2 inch on the top. And our print grid size is 10 rows, 5 columns. Like I said, it looks like this, 5 across, 10 down. If I were to measure this margin, it's a 1/2 inch, and this margin here is also a 1/2 inch. And so for my label stock, this is the correct setting. There is no gap between the rows or the columns on my label stock. It looks like this. There's no space in between this label and this label. Some label stock has a space there, so if it has it there, you would put it in. The font family. So all of this label form is in the background. What they're using is a programming language called CSS. And so you have to use measurements and fonts that CSS understands. So it understands most of the basics, and you can certainly Google CSS and find out which fonts exactly it uses. But I like Helvetica. It's very simple. I like 12 point and I like bold. So you can just set this however you want them for your labels. I don't use any of these next three. The left margin for the spine label in our case is a 1/2 inch. What that means is, looking back at our template, from the very edge of the label, how far over do you want it to go before it starts printing? I like the print of my labels to be more towards the middle of the label. So I found that leaving a 1/2 inch margin before it starts printing gives me that little bit of space that I need. If you have it at 0, it will start typing letters right at the very edge of your label. And that, I think, looks kind of weird. But if that's how you want it, you would set this at 0. In our case, we put it at a 1/2 inch, and it seems to come out sort of centered on the label. We don't use pocket labels, so we don't do the next one. But if you did, just fill in what the margin would be, the height of the spine label, and the width of the spine label. So in our case, our spine labels are 1 inch tall and 1.5 inches wide, so I filled that in. And then it's all ready to print. Now, as you're typing this in, you are going to get it exactly how you want it, save it as a template. So to put in the name of your template and save, and then apply your template to everything that you have. And you'll notice some of your labels might shift around to be exactly how you have your settings set up. Now, I have in the past had trouble with the settings not setting up right because of mistakes that I have made in how I have entered the measurements. So like I said, this is all using a programming language called CSS. So if I enter this measurement differently, like if I put a space between the 0.5 and the inch or a period at the end, it's going to mess up how everything lays out. Same with the points for the font. So this is the way that CSS likes things typed out. So if you're doing 1 inch, it's 1 IN, no space, no period. So all three of these examples are incorrect. So if you typed it in one of these ways, I just automatically put that period at the end when I type, and I had to learn to not do that, because when you do that, it doesn't know what you mean, and so it doesn't print right. If you're doing a fraction, so 2.5 centimeters, it can measure in inches or in centimeters, you would put 2.5 cm, no spaces, no fractions. So all of these are not correct. This bold dark one is the correct one. And then the other place we use measurements in this form is for fonts. If we use a 12-point font, it's 12 pt, same thing, no space, no period. All of these are wrong. This is correct. We have had good luck with 12-point font, and then also 10-point font, especially if you're doing some of these 3-line ones. They just need a little bit more room, so sometimes a 10-point font is better. So now I have this all laid out how I want it. I'm going to save it and apply it when it looks good on the right-hand side, and I'm just kind of ballparking based on what it looks like. If it looks like there's spaces in the margin that I set and all those things, then I'm going to print and see what it looks like. Again, if it doesn't look good, what I found most often is the problem is that I have entered these CSS measurements wrong. So going back to this and checking, making sure you didn't put, say, a period at the end or a space someplace that it's not expecting it, because that will make it read it wrong. So if I have everything laid out pretty good, I'm going to go to print. And here's a print preview of how the labels are going to print right now. There's a couple of things that you can do with this. You can eyeball it and say, yeah, that looks like it's probably going to be about right. And then throw in your label stock and print and see how it comes out. If you're not sure, and this is me a lot because I work at 4 different schools, so that's 4 different printers. They feed 4 different ways. It doesn't always look the same at school 1 that I'm at the morning as it does at school 2 that I'm at in the afternoon. So I will very often do a test print. So I will print this on a piece of paper, and then I will hold up my label stock with a piece of paper with the printout with it, and hold it up to the light and see if it seems like it lines up right. Because you can solve a lot of problems from that. If it doesn't line up right, you can go back to your settings and change some stuff around so that it does line up right. But when I have it how I want it, I'm going to print, and it will print on the label stock, and then I will have my perfect labels. Another thing about printing, I shouldn't have closed that. I had one more thing to tell you, which is sometimes you have trouble if in more settings, and yours may be a different way, but wherever it has this scale, if it's not at 100%. If it's not at 100%, it's going to try to maybe squish some stuff in or fit it on the page, and that's not what you want. You want it to print exactly how it shows here, and you don't want it to give you any margins or change anything around or print it smaller, because it needs to be exactly 100% to match up with the measurements that you've made. So if anything else is coming out weird and you still can't figure it out, check that scale and make sure it's at 100%. When it's all ready, you're going to print it. Hopefully they come out beautiful. If they don't and you can't figure out why, feel free to give me a call and I could try to walk you through it or take a look at it and see if I see anything different than what you see. You may have differences in your printer, so that's always another thing to try, is to say, look, I measured this and it measures at 1 inch, but my printer is printing it funny, and I found out if I put it at 1.2 inches, then it prints right. Then don't question that, just put it at 1.2 inches, even though your ruler and your printer don't agree. The printer is the ultimate decider because that's what's printing it out. So yes, anything that I can help you with, let me know. Otherwise, happy printing. Enjoy your spine labels.